I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion.
4 to 6 weeks later.
I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand. That should be where America's at.
Senator Lindsey Graham has recently proposed a federal 15-week ban on abortion in the United States. I'm a board-certified OBGYN. Let's talk about some of his comments on this bill and what it would mean in practice. I went through the entirety of the bill in preparation for this video, and I've linked that in the description box down below. As a medical professional, I find the wording in the bill extremely problematic. None of it is in line with what we would use medically or scientifically, which makes it difficult to interpret legally for doctors who are at risk of being jailed over this. They say a lot of, oh, the science says this or that, but they don't cite any sources. And as far as I know, there were no medical professionals involved in the writing of this bill. One of the more alarming things in this bill to me is the exceptions part. It includes exceptions for the life of the mother only when there are physically life-threatening situations, meaning emotional and psychological issues are specifically excluded. No suicide risk, no interpartner violence, only physically life-threatening conditions that are actively ongoing. That's a problem to me because it completely ignores a huge part of our health, which is mental health. Another extremely concerning, among many things, part of this bill is the rape exception, which specifically states that the person who was raped must have been examined by a medical professional for that event or be receiving counseling, and that the counseling can't be provided by the same people or the same organization who provide the termination, unless it's a hospital facility. What that means in practice is that not only do you have a patient population who's more at risk for not being able to access healthcare or counseling, especially counseling. We all know how difficult accessing mental health care in the United States is, but you can't be the person or the organization who helps provide that to your patient. Rape of a minor is only covered under the exceptions if that has been reported to authorities. It should be required to be mandatorily reported to authorities, but that should not be a precursor that's required prior to accessing your healthcare. All that does is delay the timing to the procedure and also increase the risk to the minor child who is pregnant. So now let's see what Lindsey Graham himself has to say about this bill.
We will introduce legislation, along with a lot of my colleagues, to basically get America in a position at the federal level I think is fairly consistent with the rest of the world.
Federal 15-week ban on abortion in no way puts us on par with any other country in the world. Every country that he's talking about with a gestational age limit ensures free and easily accessible care prior to that gestational age limit. The bill he's proposing doesn't do that in any way, shape, or form because it doesn't address the multiple states in the United States which have zero access to termination, like my home state of Texas.
15 weeks. A baby's at the 15-week period. What does that mean? Well, it means if you're going to operate on the baby, which happens, the standard practice in medicine is to provide anesthesia. Now, why would you do that? You provide anesthesia because the science tells us at the 15-week period, the nerve endings of the baby are pretty well developed and the child feels pain.
We don't have definitive science that says anything like what he's presenting in this video. The reason that fetal surgery requires anesthesia is because fetuses move a lot. When you're operating on a tiny fetus, you need it to be still, otherwise movement could cause detrimental issues and mistakes during the surgery. Pain is a very complex topic. It requires discussion of both the physical development of neurons that transmit noxious stimuli, as well as the psychological interpretation of pain. All of these things require a very well-developed neural and psychological development stage. This is nowhere near a settled topic as he presents it, and it's also not an argument for forced birth. If you've watched my channel before, you know that the topic of abortion for me is a difficult one because I grew up very pro-life. I grew up in a very conservative area of Texas in a small town religious community. This has taken me a long time to get where I am to understand this topic in the way that I do. For me, this topic really boils down to nobody else on the planet has the right to force someone to keep them alive using their body if that person is not fully on board with it. We have to give people who are pregnant bodily autonomy rights. Even a corpse cannot have their organs donated to save lives of many people unless that person or their next of kin has consented.
I think we should have a law at the federal level.
Lindsey Graham himself has previously stated that abortion should be a states' rights issue.
I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion.
4 to 6 weeks later.
I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand. That should be where America's at. If we adopted my bill, our bill, we would be in the mainstream of most everybody else in the world. I think there are 47 of the 50 European countries have a ban on abortion from 12 to 15 weeks. I picked 15 weeks. Now, why did I do that? Because I feel comfortable at 15 weeks, the science tells us that the nerve endings are developed to the point that the unborn child feels pain. So the theory of the case here is not to be like Europe so much, is to have a standard in America that would prohibit abortions during the birthing process at a stage where it's pretty clear from the science and most of the world, this should be a no-go.
Okay, so aside from the fact that abortion during the birthing process is not legal in the United States anywhere and hasn't been for quite some time and was never a typical practice anywhere in the US, the only way that this legislation could be considered similar would be if it guaranteed access, not only access, but free and easy access for everyone in the US prior to that point.
And the first thing I would say about the Dobbs decision is that abortion's not banned in America. It's left up to elected officials in America to define the issue. You have states have the ability to do it at the state level, and we have the ability in Washington to speak on this issue if we choose. I have chosen to speak. I have chosen to craft legislation that I think is eminently reasonable.
Quite frankly, I do not care what some senator from South Carolina thinks is eminently reasonable, because you are not an expert on this topic, nor are you a patient who is going through it.
In the eyes of the world, and I hope the American people.
As someone who currently lives in some other part of the world, I can assure you that the eyes of the world are slow blinking and rolling into the back of its head with every word out of your mouth, Senator Graham.
At 15 weeks, pretty much strong majority of Americans believe abortion should be the exception, not the rule.
Given that 93% of abortions in the United States are currently done before 13 weeks, this already is the exception and not the rule.
So right after the repeal of Roe v. Wade, my Democratic colleagues introduced legislation in Washington to create a national standard.
Yeah, that's because you took away access for more than half of the country.
Chose a bill that allows late-term abortion virtually up to the point of birth.
Late-term abortion is not a medical term. This is a very intentionally worded phrase that is used in politics, often used to represent abortion after 20 weeks, sometimes after 28 weeks. These are, regardless of the gestational age that they're referring to, extremely rare events that are happening in less than 1% of terminations and are almost exclusively done due to wildly extenuating circumstances. What these bills do is preferentially affect people who have lethal fetal anomalies. So what you have is a patient who goes in for a 20-week ultrasound, wanted pregnancy, maybe even an IVF baby, and finds out that their baby does not have a brain, never developed a brain. Instead of being given the choice to end the pregnancy now because it's going to be emotionally and physically dangerous for the person who is pregnant to continue it, or to continue it because that's what they desire, you've taken away one choice. And you've given them the only choice being to go to the grocery store every day for the rest of their pregnancy, every week for the rest of their pregnancy, and someone to say, "Oh, you're getting so big. Is it a boy or girl?" And they have to say, "Oh, it's a boy, but he's going to die when he's born." Nobody should be forced to do that.
They chose a bill that would repeal at the state level virtually all pro-life protections passed at the state level. They chose a bill that would not put us in the mainstream of the world, but put us in a group of 7 nations that allow abortion on demand pretty much up to the point of birth, like North Korea, Iran, and a few others.
Some interesting and not at all purposefully chosen country examples, I'm sure, Senator Graham, but how about our friendly neighbors to the north, Canada, who has no gestational age limits written into their law and who is far more comparable to the United States in terms of culture and population? Just might be a better comparison to make, I would think. And then you completely left out places like New Zealand, which has 20 weeks as the termination point, and past that, 2 physicians to sign off. Neither of those places are running amok with people just willfully terminating a pregnancy at 32 weeks for no reason, because that's not what happens.
About 10% of Americans support abortion, late-term abortion, like the Democratic bill. So my legislation, our legislation, is a counter to their proposal.
And I will remind you that there is no exception for fetal lethal anomalies in this bill. You are required to increase your own physical and mental risks for the rest of pregnancy, even with a fetus that will not survive. That's what's in this bill. No exception for that. Most people don't find that out until well after 15 weeks because that's when we can see it. I would urge you to strongly consider that when you put these bans into effect, you are not having the outcome that you are hoping, which is decreasing elective terminations, I suppose, but you are hurting families who are already having the worst day of their life.
And I'm hoping that the more we talk about this issue and what we're trying to accomplish at the federal level, we can rally the public nationally, and we should be talking about legislation for the nation as a whole that would put us in line with the science in the civilized world.
He keeps using this phrasing that this puts us on par with the rest of the world, and that's silly. This doesn't do that at all, and he's using this as a talking point, and it's just an outright lie. Thanks for being here today, y'all. I hope that you learned something. If you'd like to see a couple of my other videos on these topics, I will link them right over here. If you're new and you'd like to subscribe, we would love to have you. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. I'll see you next Monday.